There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about bookish, literary, writerly articles online. And how happy am I to welcome for her first appearance on this series and her second appearance on my channel, first and second of many, I sincerely hope, Mindy joining us from Glasgow. Hello, Mindy.
Hi, Shawn. Thanks so much for having me again.
Well, when I looked at this article, I couldn't think of anybody who I'd rather talk about it with than you, based on the one discussion we had. So here we go. This article is very enigmatic, and it's called The Eye Recommends, and it's by the author pseudonymously goes by the name John Doughboy, and it was published in the journal, I think it's only an online journal, but I'm not sure, called Minor Literatures in the October 10th edition. So, oh my goodness, how do we talk about this? Mindy, get us started. What did you think of this article?
Thanks, Shawn. Yeah, it's really interesting. We were mentioning a little earlier, just before we started to record, that I'd had to reschedule a couple of times. But one of the things that was really nice about it was returning to read it more than once and helping to really grasp different aspects of the complexity of it. So I had written down some sort of keywords that I thought, if I was trying to explain to somebody what this article is about, what it would be. So things like really about our reading world, and things like memory, the self, tastes, opinions, and in relation to literature and books and how that changes over time. And the form of the article, I think, a stream of consciousness, kind of twisty rabbit hole of thoughts that the writer goes down when he's considering this topic. And I really enjoyed that about it. The form of the article has this evocative nature to it, which tries to, I think, demonstrate the stream of consciousness, the twisting, swirling thoughts that the author has while he's writing it.
Absolutely. And I loved it because that kind of theoretical writing is something that just did me in when I was a grad student in English literature, and the kind of post-structuralist, postmodernist theory that I had to study. It got to the point where I was realizing we're not studying any literary texts, we're only studying theory. And I dropped out. On the other hand, this article was so well written and didn't have that really theoretical heaviness to it. It was a very light article. It was actually entertaining, and it was making a very interesting point. So I'm going to share what to me is a key excerpt from the piece. A lot of these sentences are a page and a half long, so I'm just going to give a fragment. The way they act, and they is just people with their very fine-tuned opinions. The way they act as if they had the opinion, and not that the opinion was had for them by the world they were formed by and in. So to me, that's kind of getting into the key of what he's saying. So yeah, how do you relate to that? Are your opinions your own? Do your opinions have you, or do you have them when it comes to
Yeah,
literature?
I really loved that line from the article as well. And it was interesting that the article did a mixture of things. It kind of manifested or demonstrated its ideas, but it also did explicitly, outline what the thesis of it itself was, which is how much agency or choice do we have over our opinions, how much control do we have of it, and how much is it other forces outside of ourselves. And I really liked this very long stream of consciousness sentence, which was manifesting and showing us how he's experienced or they've experienced that in their life, where they say about Kerouac and their relationship to Kerouac's writing, and go through this very long stream of consciousness sentence about, was it because they liked jazz music, because their parents liked jazz, because the Ken Burns documentary made them cry, or did they cry because their grandmother was sick, or because the girl I liked refused to notice me in social studies, or because I was a teenager and wanted to ditch school. So really tries to show how entangled we all are with all these different influences and things in our lives that, some of them we choose or might have some direction over, but some of them that's just, where we landed or where we started from. And I think it's really interesting. And yeah, we can perhaps talk about some of that more explicitly in terms of our own reading lives and what that's felt like. So for me, I can see that some of my tastes and the things that I like were very related to where I started from, my family, what books and things I had access to. And then other things as life has journeyed on, it's been more influenced by friends or by online recommendations and things for books or by studying and then what your interests are. So yeah, I was really interested to see the ways that this article really portrays how messy and complicated this is. And it's probably not one thing or another, that we don't entirely have our own independent opinions, but neither are they, I don't think, all thrust upon us from outside things either.
Yeah, I get we're all in a work in progress, and I'd like to think that we have some agency and some selfhood that all the forces of society are mashing up against, but that there's both forces that kind of make your own self. I always say when people have a polar opposite reaction to a book, say I hated it and they loved it, or vice versa. And my standard line is the only reason I think I might have made this up is that it's not that pithy, but it's we all read different books when we read the same book.
I love that.
Yeah. And I don't, if you love it, then I mustn't have made it up. I must have read it somewhere. But
Not at
I
all.
think
I certainly haven't heard it.
it's absolutely true, I think.
I think it's so true. And I think taking that in another direction, we never read the same book twice, because even if you read something, we might be in quite a different place when we read it again. And one of the things I really liked about that excerpt of the article is, you were saying about kind of post-structuralism and ideas around kind of structure and agency, like kind of sociological ideas of social constructionism. And quite often that's about things like, big social forces versus, our kind of identity and so on. But I really liked the inclusion of like, I was feeling sick that day, or there was something going on with somebody I liked didn't like me back. And that it can be in these really fleeting, emotional, kind of relational things as well, that sometimes we're not even conscious of. And I really liked that about it too, that as you say, we're not reading the same book, but there can be so many different reasons for our different responses to things. And I really liked that that was like engaged with in the article.
Yes, there was a Canadian, I think I can't remember which school of literary criticism he was, but he was the preeminent uh, theorist from the 1940s and 50s, I think. His name was Northrop Frye. Have you ever heard of him?
The name rings bell, but certainly haven't engaged with them.
Well, no. Well, I did a little bit decades ago, and he wrote in one of his, people are always reading Milton with a hangover. In other words, it's a very subjective thing. It depends how you respond to the text, can be definitely influenced by what's going on in your own life. How much do you relate to the phenomena of changing your opinion about a book or a writer over time? And do you have an example of that?
Interestingly, I was thinking about this. It was a really frequent complaint that my ex-husband used to have of me, that I changed and I changed my opinion about things. So I think I'm quite open-minded, and I can see how the other side of that though is that you might be kind of always changing, and it's difficult then to maybe find connection or relate to people that have got shared or common interests. I don't think I change as much as all that, but I do think I'm open-minded to different points of view. So beforehand, I was thinking about books that my relationship to has changed, and I think there's probably so many of them that actually what I ended up writing down was books that feel like home, and that when I return to them, I feel the same. Because I think the majority of books that I've ever reread, which are not, it's not something that I do that frequently, I've thought, oh, I just don't like this anymore, or I think I'm not returning to the same feeling about it. But I do have some books that I've reread lots of times, and it's not that I feel the same about them, but there's clearly something about them that I connect to, either in terms of the storytelling or the values or ideas in it, that no matter how much my life progresses or changes, it feels like I'm returning to something. So the main example of that for me is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which I've reread lots and lots of times. It's a whole big world that you can immerse yourself in. It's got really exciting and interesting ideas and really amazing characters. I remember hearing Susanna Clarke talk about the book, which she wrote over a really long period of time, and saying that the characters visit her in dreams and kind of do different things in her dreams, like they're really real people to her, and they feel like, it feels like visiting a family member or something that you haven't seen for a long time, or an old friend. And so I can connect those kinds of journeys, but there's so many more books, too many to mention, that I've ever tried to return to, and yeah, just not felt the same about them. So rereading books isn't something I do all that often. How about you?
I would say that I've had maybe better luck in loving the book, sometimes even more years later when I reread it. I can think of Annie Proulx's novel, The Shipping News, which there was about a 10 or 15 years in between my two readings. And the second reading, my first reaction was, I don't remember any of this. And my second reaction was, oh my God, this is one of the best novels I've ever read. So that one went well. And on the other side, the one writer who I have struggled with, because she was my favorite writer in the late 80s and 90s. And I have reread some of her stuff now, and I don't like any of it. And that's the American-born Canadian Pulitzer Prize winning writer, Carol Shields.
Mm-hmm.
And she had been one of my most favorite writers. And anything I've picked up and reread or read for the first time in the last 5 years, say, it's like, I don't like her stuff at all anymore. So I don't know what that's about. And it's interesting to think about in terms of what John Doughboy is writing about here.
Wow, that's really interesting. And actually, I can think of one now that you said that, but it prompted a memory that I really, really loved the works of Isaac Asimov, the predominantly science fiction writer, and reread the Foundation books in particular several times over when I was younger. And actually, the reason I read the Foundation books in the first place ties quite well into this article. It was just a book that was lying about the house that belonged to somebody at some point. I didn't really seek it out. I think it was just the next thing that I hadn't read that was in the house, and really loved them. I didn't read them in order because I think the first one that I read was like randomly in the middle of the series, and really, really enjoyed them. And now when I read them, I did try to reread them before the TV show was coming on, and felt that a lot of things that I love now in novels, things like kind of emotional depth, things like relationships between characters, just aren't there in those books. It's much more about world building, big, broad brush sort of social ideas and so on, which I really, really enjoyed at the time. But I think just my tastes have changed. I've been able to access a wider range of literature probably than when I read them at first. And also, it's maybe not that the books aren't as good, if you know what I mean, as I thought they were, but maybe I've just integrated the magic and the ideas of those books from when I read them the first few times. And so those things are never going to have the same impact for me now. So maybe I'm looking for different things in novels. I've also read a lot more feminist sci-fi since then. And so, yeah, can see that there's also quite a lot of masculinity in terms of the narrative and the stories, and not so much colonialism, but yeah, kind of masculine space exploration, sorting out the world and sorting out the future kind of stuff. And I think I'm interested in different things.
Fascinating. This article was so interesting for me, and I've already kind of tried to say this. Let me take another stab at it. This tension between how much of the I that is reacting to this book, this text, is me, and how much of it is shaped in some way by social forces. And I think another way to think about that, or one of the things that's made me think about, is peer pressure or trendiness. And I don't know if it's to my credit or not, but it's certainly true of me that I'm pretty stubbornly I pretty stubbornly resist trends
Hmm.
and like to form my own opinion. And I go to great, I would say, neurotic lengths to kind of insulate myself from a lot of the opinion around me. I won't read the back of the book, for example. I won't read many reviews. Once I've decided to read the book, I'd like to go in knowing as little about it or what other people thought of it as possible. And the one example is Sally Rooney. And now I don't know how you feel about Sally Rooney, and I'm going to ask you in just a minute. But everybody on BookTube that was kind of in my friend group, most of them just couldn't stand normal people, and they just would rant and rave, not rave, they would rant about it, and I was really curious. In fact, I tried the one before that, the name of that first novel escapes me, on audiobook, and I didn't like the narration, so I quit soon. So I thought, oh, I probably won't like her either. But I also felt more than any other book or writer over those years, I felt peer pressure not
Mm.
to like her. And so finally I read Normal People. And when I did my review video, I had a really good time stretching out the suspense as long as possible so that it wasn't until about 4 or 5 minutes into my video review, I looked at the camera and I said, and I absolutely loved it. And I did. I did. I thought it was a really great novel, and I loved the next one that she put out too. She's not to everybody's taste, but what this article makes me think about is if that's my kind of personality quirk to kind of resist the trend, is that not another way that social forces are acting on me? Anyway, first question, Mindy, what do you think of Sally Rooney?
I love Sally Rooney.
Oh, high
Um,
five.
Yeah, I really do. And I totally appreciate what you mean. I think, and I know this could also seem like I was in there early kind of thing, but that's not me showing off. I just so happened to read a Sally Rooney book before there was a big buzz about it or a big controversy around it. So I read Conversations with Friends first, which was her first book.
Conversations.
And then by the time Normal People was coming out, there was like, yeah, a lot of chat around it and definitely very strong opinions and very, yeah, I think especially as you say, much more peer pressure to criticize in a negative way Sally Rooney's books. I love them. I think, there's been so much written and said and done about them, but connecting to what I was saying about and why I don't like Isaac Asimov books so much. Sally Rooney books are kind of the opposite of that. They're very much about relationships. They're also about they are about big sociological issues, but they're demonstrating them through relationships, like kind of Marxism about class and wealth and these kinds of things, or working in a factory, or, being an author that's kind of caught up in the literary world and these kinds of things. So I love them. It's all the sort of things that I really enjoy in a book. I don't think they're perfect by any means, but for sure. I was thinking about I don't think I am as well insulated or try to be as well insulated from trends as you. And sometimes it's to my detriment for sure. I end up reading things that if I'd come to them just using my own sort of compass of books, I probably wouldn't have read them, but I have ended up doing so because there's been a bit of a buzz about things. So last year, for example, I read like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which sort of I can see how I might have arrived at it anyway, but I definitely made it more of a priority because there was such a buzz about it. Thing R.F. Kuang as well, so reading Yellowface because of all the buzz around it, and Babel as well last year. And this year, part of my intentions of reading have been much more to kind of do what you do and focus more on what things I would be drawn to anyway. Maybe also there's people that I know that know my tastes and inclinations for books really well, or people that I follow who generally have similar sort of ideas about books to me and following those things rather than what the big buzz of the moment is about novels. So but yeah, I feel kind of caught between those things. I do quite like being part of the conversation, I guess, of what's going on. So I read Prophet Song, that was another one that I read. Tom Lake when it just came out, which I absolutely loved and definitely would have read anyway. But yeah, I do think I feel a bit torn between them. And this year I'm trying to be much more just following my own instincts and path if I can figure out what that is.
Well, in listening to that wonderful response, I want to clarify what I said because I said it too bluntly. I
Hmm.
am interested in the buzz and I pay attention to it, but what I was trying to say, what I didn't say clearly enough is once I've decided to read a book, I don't want to hear anything more about it until I've read it. But I do pay attention to the buzz and I listen to, a couple of reviews, but once I've decided, oh, that's on my short-term TBR, then I kind of do as much as I can to turn it off. And if I
Oh,
and if there's too much buzz about it, I'm interested in it, but I make a conscious choice not to read it for at least 2 years until I've forgotten most of what I've heard. But no, I'm not indifferent to the buzz, so I wanted to make that a little more clear.
yeah,
But you
that's
like
a really
Sally
interesting.
Rooney. You like Sally Rooney, Mindy. So I have to say, I didn't think it was possible for me to like you any more than I already did, but I do. I do like you even more.
That's so lovely, Shawn. And yeah, I really like this policy of, kind of letting something, I don't know, have its own percolation of or whatever's
That's
going
right.
on there. And then return to it kind of more fresh because it is so powerful, the big machine that goes on. Like I'm thinking just at time of recording this, like Martyr is the big one this week, that I'm seeing on
A
my
lot of buzz
timeline
about
all the
that.
time. And
A
also
lot
the
of buzz.
new Coco Mellors book, that lots of people on my Instagram have advanced reader copies of. So, I'm definitely seeing that there are things that if you kind of went with everything that was so busy, your whole reading for the year could be taken up with things that are being kind of promoted at you. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to sift between those things, but enjoying it this year. I've had an amazing hit rate of books this year that I've loved since the 1st of January. So I think I'm happy with the way that my wayfinding of books is going this year.
Do you have anything else that you'd really like to get in on this chat?
It was such a stimulating article. It really, really was. And I think
Yeah.
in quite a short space covers so much ground and creates so much stimulus to think about our relationships to our reading life and what that is. And those are the kind of things I love to think about. And the only thing I
Yeah.
wanted to say actually was I read a book recently that I felt kind of connects in a really interesting way with some of the ideas in the article. And it's My Death by Lisa Tuttle. Have you read it, Shawn?
No, I've not heard of it.
Oh, it's been reissued. It was sort of obscure for a long time, in a sort of surreal way, engaging with the idea of authorship of the self is what I'll say about it. And I absolutely loved it. Would really recommend. It's only short. It could really be called a novella. And yeah, very much about the self and self making.
Well, I want to invite the readers to please check out the article. It's not that long. It's very entertaining. It's accessible, and you're going to go down a really thought-provoking, entertaining rabbit hole with John Doughboy. And Mindy, thank you so much for discussing the article with me, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much, Shawn. It was a brilliant conversation. Loved hearing your insights. And yes, look forward to chatting again.